evening, Rifters. This is Rifts and Rules, the 5e D&D podcast where we go through the many 5e books and talk about various rules and hard to gameplay experience. I'm Nathan, the Dungeon Master of Riftwake.
And I'm Remy, a player on Riftwake and a Dungeon Master myself. And today we're here to talk about Sidekicks Part 2, Experts and Spellcasters. So, we talked on Tuesday about the basics of sidekicks as well as going through the warrior class. So today we'll be going through the expert and the spellcaster. Before I get into those, I realized that there is something that I did forget to mention in Tuesday's episode that is incredibly important. So I'm just going to go ahead and lead with that. And that is, how does experience work with sidekicks? So there is a small blurb in the Dungeon Master's Guide talking about when there are other people in the party, they get a full share of experience. And that is the relevant rule for sidekicks. So they take up an entire share of the experience because even though they are a simplified version of a class, they are still considered to be a full member of the party for the sake of experience. So if you have 2-player characters and a sidekick, and then you kill something that is 1,000 experience, then that does mean it would be that, 333 each, because it is an even split of experience. And then they will level up at the usual levels of experience as a normal character does. So that is a very important thing to keep in mind if you are going to use sidekicks in your game, is that they are indeed entitled to experience and using that to level themselves just as a normal character does. And in the event that you are in a situation where you have multiple sidekicks with the party, like let's say that you do have the kind of party that just likes taking tag-alongs and they have 2 or 3 extra sidekicks in the party, then that does mean that the amount of experience is that much more diluted for the parties level up themselves. On the other hand, because of the fact that this is full characters that are helping out in combat, that makes sense. They ought to be getting all of that extra experience because they're there in the thick of things with the player characters. So that is a perfectly logical and reasonable thing for them to get a fair share of experience as they adventure alongside a normal party. So keep that in mind.
These sidekicks are taking our jobs.
Take your jabs. Yes. But if you do have a, low population party, if you do only have like 2 or 3 people, it can be incredibly valuable to them to have a sidekick in the party. So it is up to, the DM and players together to decide, is that something that is worth that trade-off to them? And at least in most situations, just my argument would be, yeah, that could absolutely be worth it if there is a skill set that the party needs and doesn't have. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in, to experts and spellcasters. So we'll go ahead and start with the expert. So, I just noticed another thing that I had unfortunately forgotten to mention. So I did mention that all of the examples given of sidekicks in the Essentials kit are humanoid. However, I did not mention the races at all. And there is just a short mention that a DM can choose when making a sidekick to apply the racial bonus of a race to the sidekick characters. So in the event that you do have, let's say, a tiefling expert, then they would get the usual tiefling bonuses to charisma and intelligence. So that is something to keep in mind if you are building an expert. Then because of the fact that a lot of them do have, odd numbered stats, that could be a way by just using convenient racial bonuses like, variant humans +1/+1 to whatever, or a half elf's, charisma boost and +1/+1. That could be a very convenient way for a DM to just round off those odd numbers. And just the OCD side of me just very much thinks about that angle of things because I hate odd numbered ability scores with a passion. But that's just me. It is known that I have my preferences. Anyway, experts. So experts in general get proficiency with simple weapons, rapiers, short swords, and light armor. So they are not super well geared to be in the thick of things. And an expert in general is almost a kind of amalgamation of a bard and a rogue. So they are not the most damagey type character. but they do have some real useful abilities. So at level 1, they start out with studded leather, and they have ability scores of 10 strength, 15 dex, 12 constitution, 13 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 14 charisma. And also just 1 proficient saving throw in dexterity. And expert is meant to be the skillful type character. Expert skills checks out. So they start out with the skills acrobatics, performance, persuasion, sleight of hand, and stealth. So they also get common as well as a language of their choice. They have proficiency with thieves' tools and a musical instrument. So like I said, kind of bard/rogue. Also, at level 1, they get an incredibly helpful feature. Helpful. The expert can take the help action as a bonus action. So I've talked in the past about my kind of love-hate relationship with the help action, about how it is arguably too useful. So using it as a bonus action is a very strong feature for a character at level 1. So then finally, much like all of these sidekicks, honestly, they do start out with 2d8 as their starting hit dice. So 2d8 plus 2 for an average hit point total of 11. Then they will start leveling up. So at second level, they will get cunning action. On the expert's turn in combat, they can dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action. So that one's lifted straight from the rogue, an incredibly useful feature to give them a lot more combat versatility with their bonus action. So between that and helpful, it's honestly quite a decision to decide what to do with your bonus action as an expert, because they have a lot of very useful things. Next up, expertise. Choose 2 of your skill proficiencies, double the proficiency bonus for ability checks the expert makes using either of the chosen proficiencies. So this is actually kind of interesting for a couple of reasons. Number 1, just expertise is fantastic. It's just an amazingly useful feature. But this is one of the very few things where you actually get a choice for a sidekick. So you do get to pick which of those 2 skills you get the expertise in. So do you want to be that kind of more roguelike and go sleight of hand stealth? Or do you want to be that more bard-like and go performance persuasion? So the fact that you do get to kind of steer a little bit is quite nice. Then up at level 4, ability score improvement. Increase dex by 2, raising modifiers, blah, 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 blah. Wait a minute. What the hell? I don't know if I just found a typo. Interesting. Interesting. So I was just scrolling along and I looked at the picture they have of the character sheet for the 7th level version. And instead of actually having it be the dexterity going from 15 to 17, as that seemed to imply, the dexterity is up to 16, but the intelligence is up to 14. So it doesn't actually seem like they statted it with plus 2 dex. They did plus 1 dex, plus 1 intelligence. How did they fuck that up? Okay.
Probably copied it from somewhere.
I guess, but how did they do that?
And forgot to edit it.
That's ridiculous. Did they do this anywhere? Wait a minute. What is happening here? I think they might have done this with all of them. How dare they?
Yeah, somebody was let's copy and paste.
It looks like all of them have this. All of the 4th level ability score improvements are not actually plus 2. It's a plus 1 to round out those odd numbers I mentioned earlier. How do they not? What the fuck? Okay. All right. Deep breaths, Remy. All right, everyone. We all just learned something together. Even Wizards is not perfect. So it looks like all of the sidekicks' 4th level ability score improvement is fucked up. It is not actually the primary stat plus 2. It is plus 1 to that, and then plus 1 to one of the secondary stats to round it off to an even number. They just don't mention that in the level up section for reasons. All right, I have to move past this or I've already lost it. Oh my God. All right, level 5, proficiency bonus. So as usual, proficiency bonus goes up, boosting saving throws, skills, and the to hit. Then extra attack at level 6. Expert can attack twice instead of once when it takes the attack action on its turn. So like I mentioned before, fighters tend to get that at level 5, but as a sidekick, they get it here at level 6. This is interesting though, because rogues typically do not get extra attack ever. So the fact that a rogue does get extra attack is just a nice thing in its own right. Just as a downside, I do keep mentioning the comparison to classes, but it is also very important to keep in mind that the expert does not have sneak attack. So they do not have the damage output of a rogue, but they do have a very significant amount of skills, and they can certainly hold their own in combat, but they are definitely not going to put out the damage of a rogue. But considering how complicated a feature sneak attack can be, it could be argued that that's actually advantageous that they just have a simpler feature like extra attack to give them more damage instead of something more complicated like sneak attack. So once we then move on to the next book for me to find the level 7 stuff. So level 7 expert. Ooh, they get a rather interesting boost at level 7 actually. So I mentioned earlier that they get that feature helpful to cast help as a bonus action. So that gets a buff. The creature who receives the help gains a d6 bonus to the d20 roll. If the roll is an attack roll, the creature can forego adding the bonus to it, and instead, if the attack hits, add the bonus to the damage roll against one target. That is really cool, actually. So first off, the fact that that isn't the type of feature of, dexterity modifier times per day or once per short rest. They could just do that every turn as a bonus action. So the fact that they can, with help as a bonus action, grant advantage. So grant advantage, and then they can choose to add the d6 to the attack roll or gamble and choose to not add it to the attack roll and save it to, if they hit, add it to the damage. That is an awesome feature. Then still at level 7, they get an additional thing, evasion. So when the expert is not incapacitated and subject to an effect that lets it make a dexterity saving throw to take half damage, it instead takes no damage if it succeeds on the save and only half damage if it failed. So this is another feature that is straight lifted from the rogue, and it is fantastic. So this is a spell that, let's say the party wizard gets a little overzealous and launches a fireball to all of the enemies, but the rogue is also there. Then this lets a rogue, if they succeed on the saving throw from a dexterity save, then they take no damage. And even if they fail the save, still only take half. So that is a hugely valuable feature. So level 7 is a good one for experts. Then at level 8, they get ability score improvement. So increased dex by 2, which will raise your initiative, any acrobatics, sleight of hand, or stealth checks, your AC. So that is quite nice. Also, I'm double checking now because I'm freaking paranoid. But yes, this one does add correctly. It is indeed actually 2 points to dex at 8th level. Level 9 is actually a little bit odd because you don't actually get any feature at 9th level as an expert. You just get the normal hit point boost, and that's it. So that's a little odd. All right, yeah, double checking just to see if there is anything I'm missing, but that does indeed appear to be the case. Wait a minute, I have a theory. Yes, okay. So 9th level, it does have something that happens. I need to double check some math because I am unfortunately now distrustful of a lot of what this says. So please pardon me as my paranoia is insisting I be sure. I thought so. So it mentions at 5th level that you do get the proficiency boost from 2 to 3. However, 9th level is the point where it goes up again from 3 to 4, but that's not listed here for reasons. I need to become a fucking editor for Wizards. This is intolerable. How do you publish official content like this and not spell check and just check your math? So for the record, it doesn't list it, but they do have a picture of the 9th level character sheet. So looking at it, I can see that it does indeed, from the picture of the 7th level version and the picture of the 9th level version, it goes up from +6 to +8. So the dexterity boost of level 8 would give it a +1, and there's no listed reason for that additional +1, but that would indeed imply that it is the proficiency boost going up. So it does get the level 9 proficiency boost. It just doesn't say so. God, that's infuriating. Anyway, level 10 is also kind of interesting. Most classes get ability score improvements at 4, 8, 12, 16, and 19. Expert gains an additional one now at level 10, which gives it an additional +2 dex, which is interesting because at that point, that is maxing out the dexterity score at 20 at level 10. So a level 10 expert has has a maxed dexterity of 20. So that is pretty nice for their initiative, for their skills, for their armor class. Good on them. And then on at level 11, reliable talent. Whenever the expert makes an ability check that includes its whole proficiency bonus, it can treat a d20 roll of 9 or lower as a 10. So yet again, this is another one just lifted from the rogue. But this feature, I'm pretty sure I mentioned back in the rogue episode, is one of the most useful class features in the game. So especially for a character like the expert or the rogue who has so many skill proficiencies, this feature means that every one of those skills that it has proficiency with, it doesn't matter if you roll badly. If you roll a 1 on the d20 roll, it still counts as a 10 because a 1 on an attack roll is a crit fail. There is no such thing for skill checks. So even a 1 on the die just gets treated as a 10, which then means that with an expert who has, a lot of useful skills, so at this level, their stealth is a plus 12, which would mean that even if they rolled a 1 on the die, they still are counted as having a 22 on that check. And that is just fantastic. All of the skills that they do have that proficiency with get that boost. And then finally, we go on to level 12 with a final ability score improvement. So this time, because dexterity is maxed out, it adds it to the charisma score this time, which will give an additional nice boost to performance and persuasion. And that's it. So that is the expert. So now let's go on back to talk about spellcasters. So I mentioned at the start in Tuesday's episode that spellcasters are the only one of the sidekick classes that actually has a choice in terms of a subclass. So there are 2. There is the mage and the healer. And both of them have some fantastic abilities because magic is always a particularly useful thing. So having a mage for some extra damage for the party or a healer, well, I hope I don't at this point have to talk about how useful having a healer in a party is. So the spellcaster in general, like I mentioned before, it has d8 hit dice as all sidekicks do, which means that they are just as durable as a cleric or a warlock or a rogue with d8 hit dice. So still less than, of course, a fighter or paladin or a barbarian, but more than a normal wizard or sorcerer. So that is pretty nice little bonus for them. So their stats are a 10 in strength, 12 dexterity, 10 con, 15 int, 14 whiz, and 13 charisma. So as expected of a spellcaster, very good mental ability scores. And they start out with wisdom saving throws as their only proficiency and training in arcana, investigation, and religion. So one thing that is also kind of interesting about this, so you get to pick your magical role at level 1. So whether you are a healer or mage, you do get to pick immediately. So if you're a healer, then wisdom becomes your spellcasting modifier. And if you're a mage, then it is, of course, your intelligence. So one, again, kind of good, kind of bad aspect of the spellcaster in general is that all of its spells are pre-selected. So a dungeon master, at least by rules as written, does not pick the spells that a spellcaster has. They are all listed as we go along. It says they gain, these spells. So a mage will get access to the cantrips, Firebolt and Light, and then with their 2 first level slots can cast the sleep spell. While a healer gets Guidance and Sacred Flame, and then Cure Wounds as their level 1 spell. And they do also have a quarterstaff that they're able to use, but not particularly well. So one other little detail about spellcasters that makes them rather different than, other spellcasting classes is the fact that spellcasters gain proficiency with simple weapons and light armor. So again, unlike wizards and sorcerers, they could get, leather or even studded leather armor once they have the gold for it. So having that little bit of armor proficiency can help make them a little bit less squishy. So good on them. So then they will start leveling up. So I'm not going to kind of branch out talking about the mage and then talking about the healer, because in the actual level up blocks, it just mentions both at the same time. So I'm just going to go through it as it is written here. So at level 2, before I get that, just a little detail I noticed. So I did mention, of course, that they do have the D8 hit die. Unfortunately, because of the fact that they are built to have a 0 constitution, they are still going to be a little bit on the squishy side. So even though they do indeed get an additional D8 every level, they do not get any constitution bonus because they don't have any constitution bonus. So just keep your eyes open for an amulet of health. That would very much be the best friend of this class. Anyway, level 2. The spellcaster learns another first level spell, Bless for a healer or Burning Hands for a mage. Simple enough. Level 3. Spellcaster gains 1 first level spell slot. Also, another first level spell. So Shield of Faith for a healer or Shield for a mage. Shield. Such a fun spell. So at that point, they'll have 3 first level spell slots. Then at level 4, so the mage's intelligence goes up by 2, or the healer's wisdom score goes up by 2. Also, the healer learns the cantrip Resistance, and the mage learns the cantrip Mage Hand. So because, of course, I don't actually trust what it tells me anymore, I'm just curious and checking the stat blocks. And I'm right. Damn. So it does look like mage does not get a +2 to intelligence. It gets a +1 to intelligence and a +1 to charisma to round that out. While the healer does actually get +2 to wisdom to boost it from 14 to 16. So once again, they just flat out got all of the sidekicks level 4 ability score improvements wrong. Grumble, grumble. Level 5, proficiency bonus. Proficiency up by 1 as usual, which will boost saving throw skills and the hit of spell and weapon attacks. Also, they gain 1 first level spell slot and 2 second level spell slots. So that is a very nice thing for them. They also gain 1 second level spell, Aid for the healer, or Invisibility for the mage. Oh, that's always a fun spell too. Aid is also one that's kind of underrated. Anyway, level 6, Potent Cantrips. The spellcaster can add the spellcasting ability modifier to the damage it deals with any cantrip. That is a fantastic ability. So normally, only warlocks can, well, that's not true, not only warlocks, but very few spellcasting classes actually gain the ability to add ability modifiers to their damage. Most of the time, it is just some amount of dice, and that's that. So considering that a damage of cantrip does grow as the character levels up, so at this point, let's just use Sacred Flame as the example, since that's the first one on top for me right now. So at past 5th level, Sacred Flame deals 2d8. So once they gain Potent Cantrip, that just grows even farther to add their spellcasting ability modifier, which would make it 2d8 plus 3. So plus 3 damage to all of their damage cantrips for both the healer and the mage is a fantastic boost in ability. Alrighty then. So now let's go on to level 7 here. So level 7 is definitely a milestone in terms of sidekicks here. So they gain quite a bit more. So it looks like at level 7, they gain an additional 2nd level spell slot, as well as 3 3rd level spell slots and a 4th level spell slot. So that's kind of odd. They kind of jump in power quite quickly here. That's odd, but that does indeed appear to be the case. So they gain also the spells. So I'll just start on the healer end. 2nd level spell, Lesser Restoration. 3rd level spells, Protection from Energy and Revivify, which is always useful. And then the 4th level spell, Death Ward. And then the mage gains access to Flaming Sphere for 2nd level. 3rd level spells, Fireball and Fly. And the 4th level spell, Wall of Fire. So in terms of actual spell selection, this mage definitely is kind of on the fire side of things, which is quite nice. Wait a minute. Okay, so one thing that it also didn't mention, they also seem to have picked up Cure Wounds for the healer, as well as Burning Hands for the mage. So that's nice. So it doesn't actually mention the spells that get picked up as it ought to. So that's unfortunate. So keep your eyes on that if you are building these. One thing that I should also just mention, come to think of it, I probably should have mentioned this a while ago. In the event that you do have D&D Beyond, they do have every single level of sidekicks available in D&D Beyond, but in a stupid place. Like, even if you just search sidekicks, it does not come up easily. So in D&D Beyond, there is a tag kind of on the character sheet, or just a tab, I should say, that just says extras. And on extras, you can just add basically creatures to your character's character sheet. So that is meant to be something like useful useful for wild shape forms, or useful if you have, a weird mount or just a horse in general. And you could just add this to have easy access to it on your character sheet. And in that extras tab is where sidekicks live. So you can just add, 4th level expert, 11th level healer. So it is just added as an extra onto the character sheet, which is a stupid place to put it, but whatever. That's where it is. Anyway, spellcaster 8th level, ability score improvement. Improve intelligence for a mage or wisdom for a healer by 2. And then also gain an additional 4th level spell slot and the spell banishment for healers or polymorph for a mage. Then at 9th level, they will gain a 4th level and a 5th level spell slot, as well as a 5th level spell, greater restoration for a healer or cone of cold for a mage. So now I'm flipping to the next book once again. All right, let's see. Then at 10th level, spellcasters get empowered spells. Choose a school of magic whenever the spellcaster casts a spell of that school by expending a spell slot. The spellcaster can add its spellcasting ability modifier to the damage or healing roll, if any. So that is quite interesting. So spells of magic are the way that spells are kind of sorted out in D&D. So that is things like abjuration for the protection spells, conjuration for things that are created, divination for getting information, and on and on and on. So the fact that you can just choose one and then add your ability score modifier to rolls, damage or healing, is really useful. So the fact that this would mean then that if you do have, cure wounds for the healer, then that is an evocation type spell, which means it's kind of dealing with energy. So this would allow you then to add your ability score modifier to the damage. So even though cure wounds normally already adds your modifier, because it is specific beats general, this lets you add it again. So this would mean then that if you have a spellcaster healer of this level and you have, whatever it is at this point, +3 to your wisdom, so that would mean that even a first level cure wounds, instead of just healing a d8 +3, would add another 3 to be a d8 +6 for every single casting of the spell. That's fantastic. Or for the mage, if you're casting, Fireball, which is actually also an evocation spell. So that's convenient. Actually, yeah, a lot of the spells they have are evocation related. So that's a handy one to pick for this. Anyway, so having Fireball deal 86 +3 is just that little bit of extra fuck you, which is always nice. So also still at 10th level, they also gain an additional cantrip, Spare the Dying for healers, or Shocking Grasp for a mage, and an additional 5th level spell slot and 5th level spell, Mass Cure Wounds for the healer or Hold Monster for the mage. And at 11, they gain yet more spellcasting, a 6th level spell slot and spell, Heal for the healer or Chain Lightning for the mage. And finally, we move on to the 4th book to find the level 12 stuff. There we go. Spellcaster, ability score improvement. So the intelligence of a mage or wisdom of the healer goes up by 2, boosting everything up. So makes sense. Level 12, that is the typical milestone for that. So yeah, that's it. That is all there is to know about sidekicks. It is not the most user-friendly system at this time. I do sincerely hope that at some point in the near future, perhaps even in the new book coming out next month, that maybe they will actually add all of it just in one place. That would make our lives a lot easier. But anyway, disregarding the issues that I do have with the system, I do believe that the idea of it and the basics of its rules are a fantastic resource for dungeon masters, or just for new players, or just for players who just are in the mood to play a simpler class. The fact that it is still very solid choices, even if it does lack in versatility, gives solid options for all those people I mentioned to have a simple but fun gaming experience, as well as a resource to flush out a low member party, which is another topic that we will be talking about in the near future.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Rifts and Rules. Please leave us a review and give us 5 stars on iTunes. Also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/riftwakepodcast. Tier stars low as $1, and even that much really helps us out. Supporters get benefits such as behind the scenes content, early access to episodes, access to the Patreon Discord where we will chat with the cast, and even a shout out on the show. Find us on social media on Twitter at riftwakepodcast, on Facebook as Riftwake, and on Reddit on the subreddit r// riftwakepodcast. And now send us an email, riffsandrules@gmail.com.
That's riffsandrules@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.